This is a warning to all living mortals that on the 13th of December, Moose will release 13 of the most terrifying interviews of horror unto the world.
That's right, 13 brand new episodes in the month of December, leading up to our season premiere. And until then, Horror Hounds, mash on.
On the 10th day of Christmas, Moose brings to me Steve Merlo, the Sawyer Massacre, a Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan film.
Welcome, Horror Hounds, to another episode of Moose's Monster Mash. I'm your host, Moose, and this is another installment of the 13 Horror-fying Days of Christmas. And today's gift, well, it's a tale of terror that gripped a small Texas town and has haunted them ever since. Let's just get into it. From the Sawyer Massacre, Mr. Steve Merlo.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm glad we were able to get this locked in, because, I mean, we were back and forth as whether or not schedule would allow it, so.
Yeah, I know, and schedules can be tough sometimes.
You know, and this is one of those movies that I really wanted to talk about, because I remember seeing the Indiegogo campaign announcement, and I was like, okay, it's definitely an interesting idea, which leads me to where I wanted to start. This is, and the movie starts off, it's the unofficial prequel to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Why a prequel? In everything in fan films right now, you chose to do a prequel. Why?
That's something that took a lot of thought. It was mostly about picking a time period that felt relevant. So it wasn't to do a prequel to tell an origin story or anything like that. It was, I wanted to choose a time period that I felt was going to have some significance to it, that made a mark in the social climate that was, an important time, for the U.S., but also a very dark time overall, with the Vietnam War starting and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to make sure I had a time period that felt symbolic, and also, but something that could also contrast a lot with what's relevant today, So at the time I wrote it, actually, it was actually 2019 when I more or less had the finished. We did make changes going into shooting and stuff like that, mostly due to locations and stuff like that. But it was in 2019 before the pandemic, and it was amazing when the pandemic hit, how much I could go look at my script and say, "Oh my God, there's references to the pandemic in this movie," without even having known that was going to happen at the time. There's Grandpa talking about this virus, and it was he's talking about the virus of the human race.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But there's just these little subtle things, and hey, that is relevant today. Now, it's more relevant now than it was when I wrote it. So, I was. It was just about choosing a time period that I felt like this was a significant time to talk, to set your movie, because that was one thing that was great about the original. It was a product of its time, and it really reflected on all the miserable things that were happening in that time period. So I wanted to kind of do the same. I wanted to represent it in that same manner.
Well, and you're obviously a fan of the original movie. So when you sat down to start this project, what was the spark that was like, yep, I want to tackle because if you look at the fan film world right now and indie film world right now, it's flooded with Jason, it's flooded with Michael, and here you come with Leatherface. What about Leatherface just as draws, and not just you in particular, what do you think draws people into the Leatherface character?
He's very disturbing in my opinion. I know that some people view him as a sympathetic character, and to an extent he is, but to me there's nothing, he's so real. I guess that's always been my thing with horror. I want to feel like something is real, because that's what scares me the most, is what actually feels like it could happen. So I've never been very fond of like supernatural horror and stuff like that, although there's a few that I don't mind, that I can get into a little bit, but he is a very real person, and I think that was the thing that the original did better than the others. Any of the others in the franchise, Leatherface feels genuine in that film. As soon as he steps on screen, he's a real person, and you believe that person is somewhere in Texas, and there probably is a Leatherface somewhere in Texas that you don't know about. And I think that's what intrigued me about him the most. And then, learning about the cannibalism aspect and the fact that he's actually wearing his victims' faces, and why he's wearing his victims' faces, and I think that to me is what makes the character so unique. And there's still some ambiguity behind him, it's you don't know his real name, at least not in the original. They've always kind of, his name is Bubba, or his name is Jed, or I don't know what his real name is, but in the original, he was called Leatherface, and that was all he was called. And the hitchhiker was called the hitchhiker, and the cook was the cook, and Grandpa was Grandpa. Who are these people? They didn't even have the Sawyer name back then. I was hesitant to even call my film the Sawyer Massacre, just because I wanted to keep that ambiguity behind. I wanted to really only reference the original, but enough people convinced me to call it the Sawyer Massacre. So I don't know. I'm still not. I've never been a fan of the name, but once I went for, committed to it. I really committed to it. So, but there's a part of me that thinks it's in some way should be just called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre of '65 or something like that. Just to keep it still Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I guess. But yeah, for all those reasons, to me, Leatherface, at least the original interpretation of the character, the original version of the character, he's just the scariest horror villain in my mind. Anyways, the whole family is really terrifying when you really look at it. But yeah, Leatherface was the poster boy, I guess you could say, and it's pretty terrifying.
Oh yeah, it's funny that you said that. One of the things that you really liked about the original was that the original was a product of its time, and what I found throughout watching Sawyer Massacre is that, and I don't know if it was intentional, but you kind of lean into Leatherface being a product of his environment, which has always kind of been that, they made him the way he is, which lends back to that, sympathetic character. So I just thought the parallel there was pretty cool, that it just kind of locked in.
Yeah, that was definitely intentional for sure. I definitely wanted to keep him, him being like the product of his family, and Grandpa essentially being the one that's trained him to become the way he was, even though Grandpa's, can't really do much, but you even see like little hints of Grandpa showing him how to do stuff the way he did. And, and so, I really felt like Grandpa was important to keep, Grandpa was important to show how Leatherface really became that killer he was. Cause I always kind of believed that, characters like the cook, probably wanted to control him, and keep that part of him hidden. Again, that's up to interpretation, but, I really felt like there was a bond between Leatherface and Grandpa. Even when I watched the original, you see Leatherface, I think you see Leatherface kind of even give him a kiss at some point in the movie. I can't remember. I'll have to double check that, but there's you can see there's a bond between Leatherface and Grandpa. And I think you can really tell that Leatherface really loves Grandpa. And I think I felt like it's because, Grandpa trained him to become the person he was. That Grandpa almost kind of raised him in a sense, So that was important to me. I wanted to really explore that a little bit more with this film. And, some people think that's kind of risky, but we took a few risks with our film, but hey, if you don't take risks, there's no reward.
Right. Well, and that was always one of the elements that I really liked, because I had a really strong relationship with my grandfather. So seeing that on the big screen with this, kind of outcast guy who, you probably shouldn't like, but you're just like, oh, well, okay, he's been dealt a shit hand, So it's always fun and almost heartwarming to see that relationship play out, because he's not just a monster. There is something behind the mask.
Definitely, I agree.
There's another character trope that comes up in your movie that I wanted your opinion on, and not necessarily from a filmmaker's perspective, but just a horror fan, etc. Let's look at your victims or could-be victims and their inquisitive nature at the beginning. One might call them stupid. All of them. Is that just do you think, because obviously you need them to be super inquisitive, otherwise there's no movie, but do you think that's people really would be that dumb, or is it more they're just well, now I want to see what's going on. Is there a guy down the street actually selling supplies? Because that trap that trap caught a lot of people.
And that could be, it depends on how you look at it, I guess, but I tried to write it from a perspective as, what would I do? If somebody told me that somebody down the street had what I need, I'd probably still go, are you cautious? Sure. The house was pretty sketchy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I've always been kind of an inquisitive person myself, and when you need something, you're out in the middle of nowhere. I don't know. I don't feel I personally don't feel that any of our characters did anything super stupid. Personally,
I definitely don't
I get it though.
Say that it was just oh. It's that, they're running into the woodshed trope, stuff like that. Because I will, you did very much show the caution element was there, and should we be doing this? And it just made me wonder if that's the first thing that comes to your head when you pull up. Why'd you do it? And it's always astounded me in horror, because that happens a lot. It's should this be something we're doing? Well, turn around and go home. And I totally get that. And
it is something I was considering when I was writing the film. When I was writing, I'm does this seem too stupid? And I had to kind of think about it for a little bit. But I just try to put myself in their shoes. You need stuff. Well, sure, this place looks kind of sketchy, but is it really going to hurt to check it out? Did you really think? Did you really think anybody was even going to be in there? You just kind of play it by, I don't know, you just kind of play it by what you would actually think if you were there in that situation. Would you actually think there's anybody in that house? Probably not, but is it worth to look? Sure, have a look. I've always been curious. I've gone into old houses, that look like they were abandoned or probably were abandoned. And, just you never think that some guy with a chainsaw is going to come out, and you would never imagine that in a million years, but I personally think there's a lot more dumb decisions made in other horror films, to be honest with you. Because you would never see something like that happening in an old house like that. But again, you know, I definitely see the point that you're making with something like that. And it was something I did think about, you know, are these characters too, you know, going in too obvious of a trap? I don't know. I mean, that's a tough one for me. You know, it was something I did think about, but it wasn't something I said, well, these characters all seem really, really dumb for, you know. But I see your point, though. I mean, it's maybe not the strongest aspect of it, but at the same time, you have to find a way to get these people into Leatherface's clutches. And you know, I did try to do it in such a way where it didn't feel like even in the original, they just went into this house, you know. They were warned even by the cook, you know, don't go on people's property. Of course, they were talking about the other house, but you know, some people don't like it and don't mind showing you. Like, that line was pretty evident.
Right.
Whereas in this movie, they were encouraged. So they were like, "Oh yeah, don't worry about. I know it looks rough, but don't worry, my grandpa will take care of you." And you know, when you get this encouragement, it's a little bit less of that trope in that regards. But you know, I get it though, and I think a lot of people will see it that way.
Oh yeah, and you know, like I said, I want to clarify. You know, like it's definitely not a knock in any way. It's just.
I know, but I mean, I do kind of knock myself a little bit on stuff like that. I mean, I do see issues I had with the script, and I think I should have done this a little bit differently.
Well, and you're
not just
you're
that
tear it apart
particular,
the
like
rest
other
of your
things.
life, though.
What's that?
I said you're going to keep tearing it apart the rest of your life, though, because you did
Oh,
you
probably.
put it out, and you're going to keep finding things that.
I mean, it's part of my nature as an artist, you know, to critique my own work, you know. But you know, I mean, at the end of the day, I know I have to move on and make other stuff. But you're never satisfied with your own art. I think at the end of the day,
right.
You know, it's definitely by far from a perfect film. But
it's good.
I think it has its good positives. I guess so. It did.
You know, I mean, you promised a movie in the realm of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's shot well. The kills are great. And it's a solid story. End of the day, I don't know about everybody else. It's all I care about.
That's good. I mean, I hope people think it's a solid story. I mean, I wanted to make something more character driven, and I know that a lot of people aren't going to like that. You know, when it comes to horror, they just want to see kill, and who cares about the characters, you know? But and I do kind of think that with as far as, you know, making the dumb decisions, you know, does that take away from the characters? Because I really tried to set up the characters to be likable. That was my biggest goal, is to make sure every character felt like a genuine likable person. But at the same time, you got to see how they get into trouble, you know. But it is always a risk when you write something that's kind of more character driven, that people aren't going to care about the characters. Who cares about characters in horror, right? Let's just see them get killed. I don't know. I care about characters.
Well, see, and that's such a double-edged sword right there, because in horror and horror specifically, if it's not character driven, people will gripe that you didn't care about the people that were dying. It was just a gore fest. Then on the flip side, if it is character driven, it's, I wanted more death, I wanted more gore. And it's like,
this was a boring movie. I've heard that.
Well, you can't have it both ways.
I know. Yeah. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't, you know. So I mean, it's I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I knew I wasn't going to please everybody with this movie, and you know, some people went into it thinking they were going to love it and didn't. And hey, that's okay, you know. It can't be for everybody. But you know, I'm happy to see we do have a decent audience for this movie, because I wasn't sure. Like, I'll be honest, man. Before this thing was released, I was like, I don't think people are going to like this movie, because I could see all the flaws. I see every little flaw in this movie. I can see all the things I was trying to do that I couldn't do due to budget, and the locations were just not quite what I was hoping for, and all these elements that were against us, against any movie made on 5 figures, rather than 7 figures or 8 figures like a Hollywood film. But we made the movie. We told the story, at least, and I think that's why the majority of the audience likes the film. Because the story is there, and they can see past a lot of the, suspension of disbelief in some areas, and how maybe a little choppy some of it is, and that's just due to time. That's just due to filming a movie in 9 days, a feature film in 9 days, which should be impossible. It should be impossible to do that, but somehow we pulled it off.
Where did you film it all at?
It was in various locations in Central Texas, but most of it was filmed in a little town called Bartlett. That's just about it's about 45 minutes northeast of Austin. So the majority of it was there. We had one location that we had to go a little bit further. We had to go towards Houston and that was the basement. All the basement stuff was shot in a small town towards Houston. Because I didn't realize this when I wrote the script, but basements are extremely rare in Texas. Extremely rare. So I had to get creative with that. But a little bit of a drive out of the way, but a couple hours. But we made it work.
Well, see, and this is another one of those things that really helped. Another one of those things that I think really helped bolster your audience was when you were announcing like where you were filming and what you wanted to film. The Netflix TCM had just dropped, and there were a lot of people in the horror community talking about how they were excited that this one would be shot in Texas and not some little town overseas. So I think that was a brilliant choice.
Why, thank you. And, at the time when before I started, before I really went into pre-production on this film, I really thought, man, it would be so awesome if we could actually film this thing in Texas. I'm from Western Canada, and, I was prepared to shoot it here if I absolutely had to, but I always thought it would be a great goal to actually raise enough money to film it in Texas. And I didn't realize it at the time, but holy crap, that was smart marketing, because, everybody knew that this new Texas Chainsaw Massacre film that came out this year was not being shot in Texas. And I think there was a lot of people actually disappointed that they went overseas again. There was the second time that they went to Bulgaria to
create Texas.
To create Texas with some set that was an obvious set. I mean, if there's one big eyesore in the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think it's that town setting does not feel authentic whatsoever. But, I won't get into that too much because, hey, you know what? that movie has some positives too, but, when I was promoting shooting this film in Texas, I would get people reaching out to me. Are you going to shoot it in Texas? Because if you do shoot it in Texas, I'll support. And I was like, yeah, well, I will have to see how much we raise. I was like that at first.
You support, I'll shoot it in Texas.
Yeah, exactly. That was pretty much it. Because I wanted to shoot it in Texas, and eventually got to the point where I was getting messages from people in that area. They were like, "How about this? I'll pay you for this. I'll get you. I'll do a package deal or something like that. It'll be a couple grand, and as long as you're shooting in Texas, I'm behind you. We've got it." And so I made that commitment. We're definitely shooting in Texas. Oh, yeah. When I started to get, it eventually equaled about 10 grand that I have proof of anyways, that I can say, okay, I got, this person actually messaged me and said, as long as you're shooting in Texas, here's your money. Because they wanted roles in the film and stuff like that. They wanted little roles and to be on set and all that kind of stuff, which made sense. It makes it because they're not going to come to Canada. Right. People aren't going to, so, it actually became profitable for me to shoot in Texas, even though, of course I had to pay plane tickets and stuff to fly down there. But, plane tickets were, $2 to $3 grand. for myself and a couple of actors. And so when it was like kind of weigh what's better, save $3,000 on play tickets, but then you won't get $10,000 donated to your campaign, So it's just made more sense at that point.
It's that spend money to make money.
Exactly. I know people say it's cheaper to shoot in Canada, and there are some things that are cheaper to shoot in Canada. Depends on what. It's definitely cheaper for big budget films to shoot in Canada. I'll say that because there's so many tax incentives and stuff like that. So, but for a smaller thing like me, I don't think that it's really that much cheaper to shoot in Canada. Some of the labor costs are a little bit cheaper, but not that much cheaper really, even still. I look at we save money on our film because a lot of the cast and crew cut their regular fees down quite considerably for our film. So thank you to all those people, by the way. And I'm still kind of trying to back pay a little bit of that because I feel like people are worth the wages that they should get. But everybody was very cooperative. I can do this for you, or some people even donated their time. I was just shocked by how many people were willing to donate their time just so that we can make this movie. So, I still got my Indiegogo campaign simply for that reason. I want to see if I can back pay a lot of these people because they deserve it. They busted their ass for this movie. So. And
overall, it's been super well received.
It has. I'm shocked, actually. Again, like I said earlier, it's shocking to me, but, at the same time, I think
7.5 out of 9 average right now.
Something like that. IMDb score has been fluctuating a bit between 7 and 8.
Yeah.
Out of 10.
That's insane.
It is for an indie, for a movie made for $30,000.
Yeah.
There
are major motion pictures that don't have that luxury. So, you definitely knocked out something that the majority of people enjoy. Of course, you have some detractors, but
you're
always will.
You're going to get, if you don't get haters, you didn't do something wrong.
You're doing something wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. If you go on your YouTube comments and there's not a single comment from somebody that says I hated that film, you did something wrong.
Right.
I'm just going to say that because you need to get the hater. That means the word is actually getting out there. The word is getting out there, and you can't please everybody. That's just a fact. You just can't please everybody. But as long as I please one person, I'm a happy guy. If somebody liked my film, if somebody thought, "Hey, man, you did a great job with your film," that makes me happy. That makes me happy because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make a film for the fans. Being a fan myself, I wanted to try to capture what I would have wanted to see. But. Again, I'm critical of my work too, but I still like what I did though.
Oh, yeah.
I still do.
And like I said, start to finish, it is a solid project, solid movie. I've watched it twice now. I'll probably watch it again.
Hopefully pick up new things every time you watch it, because I am pretty subtle in my delivery.
So the second time I watched it, I actually grabbed something that I didn't see the first time, and it bugged me, but not like enough to be like, I can't watch this movie. The rims on the step-side pickup.
Oh, that. Yeah, well, you didn't see that the first time?
No, like, I was just sitting, the first time I'm just sitting back and watching the movie, I'm like, all right, this is a good movie. And sitting back the second time, I'm like, hey, crap. But...
Again, I'll say it again. This is a movie made for $30,000.
No, yeah.
And to capture 1965 perfectly was going to be impossible. I think we did pretty good considering our budget.
Oh God,
and
yeah.
you consider some of these Hollywood films mess up stuff like that big time. The 2003 remake. Oh, man, there's some stuff in there that is so not time period, but honestly,
I think it was more. I was focused in on the truck this go around because my grandpa had one that was identical to it.
Oh, I see.
So
there you go.
Like I'm watching it, I'm like, oh,
that truck.
And I'm like, oh, those rims are a little out of place, but outside of that, solid.
Oh, there's a few other little non-time period things. the shoes on the girl when she's hung on the meat hook. We got this close up of her feet dangling. Those shoes are very modern.
Well, I mean,
there's something else too. I can't remember.
Doing a period piece.
Oh, it's so hot. It's so tough.
And that was one of the things that I wanted to ask about, because and that led back into the why a prequel, because you could do a modern one and not have to worry about anything, but then here you have this prequel, and you then have that added stress of, oh my God, we're in Texas in the 60s. Is this right? Is that right?
I know.
At what point do you just say fuck it, and that's what they have?
That there were times when I considered that, but I'm stubborn. I'm stubborn as a mule. And when I wrote my script, I'm like, it's got to be 65. Yeah, I was stubborn about it. I was really stubborn. I really wanted to be as authentic as I possibly could. But I was also willing to do the research on the time period. So, I mean, that news report you hear in the beginning, I researched a lot of stuff that happened in that. And so a lot of what you hear in that is actually real. The only thing that's not real, I believe, are the people's names that are mentioned. As those were Indiegogo backers that, got a perk to get their name said in the film. But other than that, everything that you see in there, that was real. The protesters, we filmed those protesters actually in Bartlett at the city hall, and they were chanting, "Hey, LBJ, how many kids you killed today?" That was a popular protest at that time period for the Vietnam War. So I did the research. I was willing to do the research to make sure my lingo was okay. And, the costume design, I think most of it really works. Some of it I'm like, that doesn't totally feel right. But, I think for the most period, the costume design works.
Oh, yeah.
I did want to go more extreme with some of it. I wanted to have, the mom character. I wanted her to have those really 60s sunglasses and, have a, 60s style hat and stuff like that, popular hats and stuff back then. So I didn't get to go do it into as much depth with the costume design as I would have liked to. But again, that's budget. If I had a bigger budget, I would have been able to do more. But,
right.
But we made it work. And I think, other than a few little things here and there, it is pretty time period accurate. The chainsaw you see is not the same chainsaw from the original, not even close. And that was something I researched very, very early on. Because I was like, I wonder if that chainsaw existed in 65. And sure enough, it came out in 1970. So I researched older chainsaw, and it gave me flexibility because I could pick any chainsaw I wanted that was pre-65.
Yeah.
And as soon as I came across that model, I was like, that's it. That's the chainsaw we're using in our movie.
You're the star of the movie.
Pretty much. I mean, Leatherface as a whole is kind of always your star, but
Saw's family.
But I think that the chainsaw looked really good on him, in my opinion. Well, the only thing about that chainsaw, it did run, by the way. I don't think we actually had it running in any shots. I could be wrong on that, because we did get it started a few times. It's very tough to start that thing. I know for a fact we never started it indoors because it was so loud. That frickin' thing would blow your ears out. It was that loud. You had to have earplugs if it was indoors. But I'm not 100% sure, but I think that it's a very good probability that none of the shots you see in the movie, it's running. And there's a few shots you can tell it's not running. It's a bit of an eyesore. But it was such a dangerous chainsaw, though. It was so heavy. It was very loud, kind of unpredictable. That's a chainsaw from the 50s. So the fact that it does run is actually pretty remarkable.
That's a leg lopper.
It's kept in good shape. Yeah.
So I
love
know
that song.
One of the things that you've kind of gone back and forth with was the ending.
Yes.
And whether it should have been a just clean cut, here it is, little ambiguous. Now, like I mentioned before we started recording, personally, I like the ambiguity because this is a franchise built on ambiguity. So, in a franchise like this, I don't think a definitive ending is the route to take. In that,
I agree.
You always have that, well, do we get more? It always leaves you wanting more, especially in a sense where you're making something that came before. I think it almost has to be ambiguous, because otherwise you're saying, nope, this is exactly what happened, and then 5 years from now they pick back up, and this is where the franchise starts.
Exactly. That was important to me. I totally get what you're saying. I think if your ending is too cut and dry for a film like this, the talking ends there with the fans. It's like, oh, that's the ending. Whereas ending like ours, it has some ambiguity. It does play into one possibility as being like your most likely possibility, but it has enough ambiguity that it has people building theories, and I think those theories, those really intrigue me. I love hearing what fans think could be the possibility. Is this, is it a positive outcome? Is it a negative outcome? Of course, we really, really lean towards negative, but, I think there's a few positive people out there that could think that the best possible thing could have happened. But, the original way I wrote it, was missing one element from the ending, and that's the final sound that you hear. It was missing that, and I thought to myself, that has a lot of ambiguity, And then when I thought of that extra sound you hear, we'll just call it that for now. I thought to myself, that's probably too cut and dry. That's probably just and so I thought of it and I said, no, we won't do that. And then I saw something on YouTube that was referencing the exact same thing and how much ambiguity it can actually bring to a product. And it made me see that ending in a whole different light. And it essentially made me say, I gotta actually put that in the ending now. It's such a simple change. That was the thing. It was an easy fix. It was simply just adding that in the script, and adding the sound in post. But it was the right call. It was definitely the right call, because I think as soon as you hear it, it's like, holy crap. It's kind of that holy crap moment, and I felt like we needed that. I don't know if we would have had that holy crap moment if we ended the movie without that. And sorry to all those people that are watching this, like, what the hell is he talking about? Go watch the film. Watch the movie. Watch the movie, you'll find out. But yeah, there is enough ambiguity there. And again, at first I thought it was cut and dry, and it's not. It really isn't cut and dry. So I'm glad that I came up with that idea to do that. It's probably my favorite aspect of the film.
So where can listeners, follow you and check out the movie and keep up to date with future projects?
For sure. On Facebook, you can join my Sequanda Films Facebook group. That's where you'll be able to find out more about future projects. But you can also follow the Sawyer Massacre Facebook group. Also, we have a page on Facebook. We have a massive following on Instagram, getting close to 10,000, I think. So yeah, Chainsaw_Sawyer on Instagram. We have Twitter as well, Massacre Sawyer. Slasher app, all that. I'm everywhere basically, and our YouTube channel is Sequanda Films on YouTube, so go check that out, and that's where you can watch the film and watch any of the trailers, and watch even some of my past short films that I've made.
Hell yeah. And listeners, you can find me and other great podcasters over at electronicmediacollective.com, or just myself on Facebook and Twitter at Moose Media Inc. Just look for the Moose. Steve, this has been fun. And like I said at the beginning, I'm really glad we were able to lock this down.
Me too.
Here, a few months, maybe come back, do an actual dive into the movie, because there's so many things I want to talk about, but don't want to talk about yet.
No problem. I love talking spoilers. It's been hard for me to to keep myself contained, actually, because I wanted. I'm that guy that as soon as the movie was released, Let's talk spoilers.
Right. Tune in tomorrow for another episode of the 13 Horrifying Days of Christmas. Head over to YouTube, check out the Sawyer Massacre. Steve, this has been great.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, Horror Hounds, mash on.